It's actually a mixtape.
You're a prick today, Matt. I just want to put that out.
Just today.
Right, okay. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Right, hit it. Okay, hello listeners, and welcome to episode 26 of the Picky Bastards podcast, also known as our Album of the Decade special. You have a very hungover host today, so if I fall asleep halfway through, the others will take over. But as it's our Album of the Decade podcast, we have welcomed, well, first of all, I'm here, I'm Fran. Nicholas is here.
Hello, how are you all?
He's wearing a cardigan.
I am,
can't answer your question. Matt is in New York.
Hi.
Hi. And we welcome back editor of the Picky Bastards website, pickybees.com, Sam Atkins. How you doing, Sam?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Matt.
Yeah, everyone can say hi for like 10 minutes.
So, Sam has been on the podcast twice already, so we're not going to do a big introduction to Sam. The first time he was a special guest. The second time he was a slightly less special guest, and today he's just a guest.
Yeah.
But
Next time he's a hanger-on if he goes on again.
Sam, what has been your favourite album this year?
This year, no surprise, is Little Sims, Grey Area. I think I've written about it about 15 times on Picky Bastards. I think I've talked about it with all of you multiple times.
Yeah, so get with the programme, Fran.
It's funny, because when you said the other day, it's obvious, I was like, oh yeah, Lana Del Rey.
No.
No.
Oh, no.
Really?
No. But no.
I'm not sure about Little Sims, and I'm glad that everyone's finally caught. Really.
I mean, Little Sam's album is great, and Nick also compares every hip-hop album that's ever been released to it. So that's interesting.
That's right.
Yeah, even though it's nothing
all.
similar in any way, shape or form, he's like, well, it's living in the shadow of Little Sims. So, yeah, that's Nick for you. But anyway, album of the decade time. So what we did, if you've not seen the article on the website, was we got each of our writers to pick an album of the decade. There's a lot of them, so I'm going to run through them very quickly now. We have Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, Alt J's An Awesome Wave, Augustines' Rise Ye Sunken Ships, Beck's Morning Phase, Let Them Eat Chaos by Kate Tempest, Once I Was an Eagle by Laura Marling, Snowmine's Laminate Pet Animal, Kiasmos' self-titled album, I Love You Honey Bear by Father John Misty, 22 A Million by Bon Iver, Let England Shake by PJ Harvey, The Seer by Swans, The Bunkhouse by Fionn Regan, and Lemonade by Beyonce. So somehow...
There's too many writers on the blog, aren't there, Bates? We need to get rid of some people.
Somehow,
that's too long a list.
We are going to try and talk about all of those in a timely fashion. So I'm going to be a bit of a...
Bastard for the first time ever.
I was trying to think of a word that was fitting. I'm going to be a bastard. We're going to have some alarms. We're going to make people time themselves for a few questions. And we're going to get going. So first of all, I would like Sam, in a minute and a half, to tell me what his album of the decade pick was and why. Go.
So my album of the decade pick was Laura Marling's Once I Was an Eagle. I think Laura Marling was probably my biggest discovery of the decade. In terms of as a listener, I think she's one of the most listened to artists that I have in my library. And I think this album is her definitive record. I think it kind of manages to capture everything that I love about her, the way that she writes her songs, the way that her voice. I think she's probably my favourite voice of the decade in terms of the way it sounds across these songs. And I think that that opening 5 tracks, I've gone on and on about that consistently. It just makes me it just hits me so hard every time, and I think I love how, as an album, it kind of keeps returning to the same thing, the same motifs every now and again, and then it'll fade away again, and then it'll return to that again, and then it'll fade away again. I just, there's nothing that's given me more every time I go back to it over the last decade, and there's been loads of albums that were really close to being at that top spot, but in the end, this just had to be my favourite, I think.
Oh, mate, 2 seconds. Perfect timing.
That's fantastic.
Good start.
Horrible alarm for the first time, just so the listeners know.
This is Fran's favourite song.
Yeah, this is my album of the decade.
Yeah.
Please make it stop.
I don't know how to make it stop.
He doesn't know how to stop it.
Figure it out. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Matthew Paul,
Yeah.
your album of the
Yeah.
decade pick, please, and tell us about it. You have 90 seconds starting now.
Oh.
He loves being in control.
So my album of the decade pick was Bon Iver at 22 a Million. And I think this super resonated with me because it came at a specific time in my life. It's got it kind of reignited my need for music. It's such a diverse and interesting album. It's like obscure and abstract, but at the same time, like, that is maybe more the lyrics, but it creates this kind of sense of feeling and emotion throughout the entire record that I found just pretty staggering at times. I thought, considering where he came from in the prior album, he went away, spent years, and came back completely changed. And seeing someone in such control and with such a focus in the direction they wanted to go with their music, and have the confidence to pull it off, it just, I don't know. It's the album I've probably listened to more than any in maybe ever, because I just became obsessed, and much to the chagrin of everyone around me, because they got to the point where they got very annoyed by this album. But it's just, I don't know, I could spend hours talking about this, but we have 90 seconds, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It's just fantastic.
Will you stop all getting like exactly 90 seconds, please? It's very disheartening to me. Well done, both of you. That was some good timing. I'm not actually listening to either of you, by the way, just because I'm concentrating on the alarm, so I'm sure you said some wonderful stuff. But yeah, okay. Nicholas.
I'm up. Okay.
Album of the decade, go.
My album of the decade is Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Here are 7 reasons why that's the case in 90 seconds.
Wow.
It's the best produced album of the decade. It's lush and varied in its instrumentation. It's the most innovative format. The developing poem allows for the consistency, kind of a consistency across all the variety of the music. It's the most inventive lyrically. The flow is completely impeccable. It's the most complex and deep. It has so many layers. I'm running out of breath here, jeez. It is so culturally astute. Like, for example, the talk about the capitalist dream holding working class people hostage in some of the early tracks on the album. It's the most politically incendiary. Tracks like Black of the Berry play off stereotypes in this kind of absolutely vicious discourse that's unbelievably powerful. And at the same time as all these other things, it's also the most intimate. It actually manages to be a very small-scale album of honest songs about depression and guilt and pain. So there you go, less than 9 seconds, 7 reasons.
Wow, a minute. Skills, mate.
Killed it.
I don't know how to do. Oh, yeah. Can you please time me?
I will.
Sam, tell me when to go.
And you're
off.
Okay, so for me, the album of the decade was Let Them Eat Chaos by Tempest. I've banged on about this album endlessly. I've recommended it to everyone I've met. I've talked about how much it means to me on both a personal and political level, and yet I'm still not even slightly bored by it, and I haven't ever stopped listening to it since it came out in 2016. It still feels visceral, raw and real, and there's just no album that has been so consistently part of my life in this decade. Through songs like Don't Fall In, Europe Is Lost and Tunnel Vision, Kate says things that other artists skate around. She puts herself out there in a really sort of rare way. And for me at least, that makes me feel like a lot of the things I feel, a lot of the things I've been through in this decade are more normal and more okay. And I just think it's really rare that an album can do that. And then I think other things spread out across the album too, like the themes that she picks up on, such as talking about the normalisation of reactions to grief on We Die, and regret and shame that we feel for our mistakes on songs like Grubby. I just think the album's so wide-reaching, so anger-provoking, and yet so comforting at the same time. So for me, yeah, it's just a real one-off, and no other album made me feel this way in the decade, so it's a clear winner for me.
Okay, we've all on target.
20 seconds left.
Wow, flying, absolutely flying.
Nailed it.
Victory.
Okay, so does anybody... Now we've talked about those 4 albums, anyone want to chime in about any of the albums? Anyone want to say?
I can talk about Kate Tempest a little bit briefly, and just say that this was another one of my final 4 that made it to that point in my list for album of the decade, and it is absolutely phenomenal and very, very consistent all the way through. I will say that actually, I think as I think about it over time, Everybody Down, the first album, is actually as good, I think, although I know a lot of people think it's a much smaller scale project, but I find that really incredible as well, and really emotionally charged stories that are also politically kind of powerful. And I think Don't Fall In is my high point of the album, actually. Although Tunnel Vision is also, of course, pretty profound. Although I will end on a sour note and say that sadly kind of opened the door to the new album's negativity, kind of overwhelming things, I think.
So most optimistic album so far, the latest one. But,
okay, right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we agree. So so it's that's the only thing I'd say. But otherwise, I absolutely love the album. I think it's absolutely mint.
Any more for any more, Kate Tempest?
I think for me, I'm probably the person here who's probably the least into Kate Tempest as an artist. And I think I'd listened to this album a little bit. I'd listened to the newest one as well. And I think listening to it as part of this, I do realise why so many people have had such a big felt such a big impact from it as an album. I think for me it works best when it's like musical, when there's kind of the music is what really, really keeps me going. And I know as a poet, that kind of the way that she writes that poetry is really great, but that's not really my thing. I think
it's a bit like the comments made by Pete when he came in, saying similar thing. He doesn't like, he likes the poetry, he doesn't like
which
the
is kind of why
poetry.
the recent album, like I feel like that was the discussion that was when it was on the podcast that you guys had, that the music kind of fell to the wayside versus it was all about the poetry. And I think for me that's what kind of holds me back from being like super into Kate Tempest. I think
I think it's a common reaction. I really do think, and I get it as well. Like I get it, even though I love it. I totally get why people wouldn't. I totally get why.
There's such powerful moments on that. Like you mentioned Tunnel Vision. Like the moments like that are just so great. So it was worth re-listening to it. I just don't know if I'm like the biggest Kate Tempest fan in general.
That is allowed. We will allow it.
Does anyone want to talk about?
Does Matt want to say anything about?
Well, I want to talk about Kate Tempest.
Matt wants to.
She's fucking great.
Yeah.
End of conversation.
This is her peak. Like she's scathing, but also full of love, and it oscillates from these big stories to the minutia in a very controlled way that kind of adds the scale and gravness to her story. I don't think there's been a more affecting piece of art about the current political climate in Britain.
Totally.
And seeing her perform this whole album live, like a couple years ago, this is the only live experience I could actually make a claim as being maybe the best live experience I've ever been to.
Wow.
I would still discuss it to myself, but it was so emotional and amazing. Yeah,
I saw her I think 3 times on that tour, and it was you're totally right. I mean, Nick's written about not enjoying the latest tour as much, and I'm with him. It wasn't as good. Still amazing, but like that, when she was touring that album, it was amazing. Cool. Yeah. Kate Tempest. Cool. Okay, so
Kate Tempest.
Nick asked if anyone wanted to talk about Kendrick.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
I will talk about Kendrick, and I feel like we're going to have the first moment of controversy on the album of the decade.
Okay.
Really?
Podcast. So for me, I'm a massive fan of Kendrick. Both Damn and Good Kid, Mad City would probably feature in my top 50 albums of the decade. This album has the best run of 3 songs from any of his albums, with How Much a Dollar Cost, Complexion and Black of the Berry. But other than that, I find this a wildly inconsistent album. There are other great songs, there's some decent songs, but there's so much filler on this album that I can't personally see it as a great album. It's very indulgent, suffers from a lot of bloat. The repeated poem totally breaks the flow up, and the Tupac interview at the end is just silly. Add to this
what's the filler song then?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, alright.
Add to this the fact that I find Thundercat's instrumentation really annoying on some of the songs, and I see this as being by far the least enjoyable of Kendrick's 3 defining albums. King Kunta is great, but other than that and the 3 I've mentioned, I find a lot of it very average. Hood Politics, You and I think are actually pretty poor and very irritating.
Wow.
And that is where I stand on To Pimp a Butterfly.
Wow. Okay. And I know you think Damn is better, don't you?
I think Damn and Good Kid, Mad
Yeah,
City.
that's probably because of the Rihanna connection, isn't it? I know
mainly
she
the
made a
Rihanna,
big
yeah.
difference.
So this is the thing. Like, I agree. I actually agree that for me, it's probably my least favourite of the three this year. But I think all three of them are probably in my top 20 of the decade.
Oh.
Like, I think Good Kid, Mad City is probably my favourite of those three albums. I think it's a much more... I think that's a much more personal story for him as an individual. Whereas this, it's blatantly obvious why this has become the defining album of the decade, kind of worldwide, of critics and all of these things. It's kind of it's the best reviewed album of the decade, hands down.
Yeah.
Because of its cultural significance, I think, and that's the thing, is that you can't take that away from it as a record.
But tune-wise,
but if I was going to listen to one of them, this would be the least.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is so much love on this album, and you mentioned "I" as a song you don't like.
That's amazing.
The album version that
I think we've now got an eighth reason why this album is the best, because Fran doesn't get it. That's another.
I totally get it. Yeah. I just think it's not got any good tunes on it.
Completely thrown off.
Well, it's got 4 good tunes on it.
It's completely thrown off my idea. I was so certain that this would end up as the overall pick by everyone, not just because 2 people have picked it. It's their album of the decade.
Yeah, it's the only one that 2 people picked out of the writers, isn't it? Out of the 14 out.
But I just assumed everybody else felt this way, even if it wasn't going to be their number one. That it is a brilliant album, and like seeing
Fran's just contrary. That's what it comes
I
down
can
to.
tell you, I don't want to give too much away from the end, but it currently has to get past 8 albums to finish first.
8 albums. Okay.
But
see what we can do.
Yeah, I absolutely love the album, and I think that I want to mention one moment that like continuously I always mention about this album, and it's at the start of These Walls. And I think the production on it and how it's constructed, it's like there's like the sounds of like these like sex noises.
Yeah.
And then they like build up, and then it all drops out, and then someone just goes sex, and they
and it hits on it. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Like, it's just
absolutely
so
mint,
good.
Yeah.
It's just genius music, and I think Kendrick is probably, I'd say, the artist of the decade. I would say in terms of cultural,
I'm not going to argue with that. I can see why people would say that.
Who has had those 3 outstanding albums in this decade, plus 2 other albums that have had massive.
Yeah. And also for me, like, I am a fan. I'm not going to say. I think like he got me back into hip hop this decade. Like it's just this album I do have problems with. I think Thundercat's just instrumentation is just not for me, and I do think Damn is just every song on that is a tune, and it's full of really good songs. It might not be as politically interesting, but it's full of really good songs. I don't think that this album is. Matt?
I'm gonna wait to talk about this one.
Okay. Can I then just jump in on Bon Iver?
You can.
And I'm going to be, I think, just possibly in the minority here.
You might be.
What's going to happen?
Because I'm going to say that I was so tired of this album within about maybe 1.5 listens. I was so tired of this album. To me, first of all, I'm so tired of his vocal style. It just really grates on me now. I'm just so sick of that like 2-part harmony. Like it just seems just too consistent through everything. It's really annoying. And the experimentation that I'm sure the others are about to laud about this album, to me is just completely bolted on. Like it's just like him trying to do Holocene again. With some electronic beats over it.
None of it is anything like Holocene. You say this all the time, and none of it is anything like Holocene.
Well, Holocene was the high point. That's his one hit, and now it's just kind of all downhill from there.
But
one hit.
It's just one hit. Skinny Love is not a hit. Skinny Love's not a good song.
I'm talking about, it's not a good song. Not really. It's just it's very, very like creamy, sort of milky consistency of like his vocal stylings, which I find quite annoying.
Creamy.
Creamy. That's what I would say. Yeah, creamy. I'm not going to pull back from that.
Yeah.
So to me it was. I don't know. It wasn't the worst on this album on this list, but it was very poor. It was very, very poor for me.
Well.
Yes, you go, Fran.
No, you go.
We're just knives in right now.
I'm the opposite of Nick. In terms of when I'm so glad someone picked this because it was definitely one of the albums I was thinking about whether it would be my number one
Yeah.
overall. It's definitely in my top 5 of the decade, like outside of this.
Right.
And I've written on the website about like this album specifically and like why the moment when it came out, and it was really, really important to me. But I just think as you say the experimentation is just bolted on, but like I can't hear any of these songs without getting something new or feeling something different. It's like something like Death Breast is just so it's like painful at points.
That's a very good word to use.
But in a way is like it just I absolutely love that album, and I think it's weird to me still that it's somehow his, like, the moment when Bon Iver kind of went a bit crazy with the production and everything, and yet is instantly his most accessible album of all of his. I'd say it's much more accessible than the first two. And I know the first one is seen as like just folk kind of thing, but I think a lot of the stuff on the first two is quite like obtuse in the structure of the songs, and it's weird that this one is so much wilder, and yet the songs kind of seem to be more songs than before. Yeah. I think especially compared to the self-titled one, which I absolutely love as well. That's outstanding album.
Yeah.
But I think for me, this one just kind of, this decade has kind of defined him a bit more for me.
I think you can just be pleased that he salvaged it from being he's not the most underwhelming for me.
I thought he was going to be
so that you should be really proud of yourselves that you managed to persuade me to that
really
degree.
Cares what you think now, so it's all good, isn't it? So for me,
Sam made.
Oh, you go, Matt.
Well, I was just going to say, Sam, you made an interesting point there, because I think I agree it's way more accessible than the other ones, and I think it's just because the tone and the emotion is so overt throughout.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes it's like the lyrics are always obtuse, but it's so clear like what he is feeling at the time of the song, or what he wants you to feel.
Yeah, like a song like Eight Circle, like that it's just a song. Like it has like more lyrics and more kind of you can get so much more out of it, like emotionally, than anything I feel like he's done previously. So yeah,
interesting. Well, for me, I was a little bit down on this album when I first started listening to the playlist, just because of all the playlist other than Kate Tempest, it's the one I've spent most time with. So I think I was getting into some of the other albums. I was kind of I wasn't listening to this as much, and obviously the new Bon Iver album had come out not long before, and I was really into this at the time. But then there was a couple of times when I was just listening to this month, and it just reminded me what a special album it is, and it's really startling and a groundbreaking piece of work, I'm afraid, Nick. I think it also really set the landscape for a lot of music that followed, which might be why, coming back and not having spent a lot of time with it before, you see a lot of those things that don't seem that new or that interesting, because so many people tried to copy this album. So many people tried to do similar things after. And I think in terms of just the songs themselves, it's weird enough to be something new and enthralling, at the same time as still being as gentle and emotional enough as his previous works. I think the transitions between the songs, it's weird to say that as a highlight of the album, but the transitions between the songs are just amazing.
It's great when they end. I agree with that part of the transition is fantastic.
There's just, and also for me,
shaking his head at me.
For me, like we've already said, Kendrick's one of the most important artists of the last 10 years. I think that so is Justin Vernon, and I think for me, this marks a transition for him. It's not my favourite Bon Iver album. My favourite's Forever Ago, definitely, but...
Is that the one with Holocene on it?
No, it's not. But for me, he's one of the most important musicians of the last 20 years, without a doubt, and this album's incredible. So yeah.
All right, should we keep moving?
We haven't talked about Laura Marling.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Laura Marling?
Last one.
I mean, do you?
I'm not going to talk about Laura Marling.
Okay. No. I'm not going to say loads about Laura Marling, as I will be talking about her as a Why I Love in a couple of episodes' time. But I will say that I nearly picked a different album of hers as my album of the decade. I nearly picked I Speak Because I Can. But I think that's because it's got so many of my favourite songs by her. But while listening to this album, this is more of an album, and it's a definite contender for album of the decade. For me, it feels like, alongside the Kate Tempest and one other which I'll mention later, it feels like the most complete piece of work on this list. It just hangs together and flows so well, and in once, it's possibly the best song of her career. So yeah, it's a total stunner. Love it. Matt, anything to say?
I think this is actually my favorite album by her. I think it's the kind of culmination of her work. I agree with Sam. It's super polished, and the way it's like constructed and orchestrated together is just it, like you were saying, it is super complete and super purposeful. And the way she also like transitions, like you were saying with Bon Iver, she like continually has this momentum because she never stops strumming her guitar pretty much.
Yeah.
And even in between songs, it just flows, and it's about that ebb and flow throughout the album as opposed to here's a song, here's another song. And so it just creates this like everlasting warm atmosphere for which you can then experience the songs. And it makes it feel like she does the same thing live, and it makes it feel like you're there, which it's fantastic.
Cool.
I love her. She's great.
Fantastic. Right, on to the next question.
Which album grew on you most?
Yes, and we're going to start with Matt this time. So which album or artist, Matt, grew on you the most while I listen to this playlist? Go.
Kendrick Lamar.
Wow.
And this is because
That's weird.
I had the same feelings as Fran prior to this. I liked the album, but I didn't necessarily think it was his best, and I thought it was a bit obtuse and like too obtuse.
Just stop there.
But after really like this is the album I probably listened to the most this month or month and a half, and that's because I just kept going back and kept wanting to find more. Like the fusion of styles, just the artistic endeavor behind it is fascinating, and I think he swung big with this album, and I think he got a pretty clean hit. It's everything he was trying to do, I think, resonates. Just everything, the spoken word and poetry, the conversations, the discussions, just he's aiming so high with this, and he hits. The only I guess the one other thing is with that is a song where I heard the single version first, and then I heard the album version, and he completely restructured it, but it completely worked. And so even though I loved the other version, he just seemed so in control of the music that it doesn't matter that he's restructured the song completely to fit different needs. And I just think that just shows you that he's an artist at the top of his game.
Well, all well and good, Matt, but a hell of a lot of filler, right?
Shut up.
Yeah.
You know nothing.
Nicholas Parker.
Right.
Which album or artist grew on you the most? Go.
Okay, this won't take 90 seconds, I don't think, like the last one didn't. I'm going to be really quick with this. Grew me the most is Laura Marling.
Are you going to talk about any other albums?
Yeah, right. Laura Marling grew me the most. It was... I think she shows an unbelievable amount of control over the sound all the way through this. There are moments of this album which are almost completely silent, and I'm talking about mid-track, total silence, which shows an unbelievable amount of confidence and control over what she's trying to achieve. And I think you could even take the opener, take the night off as an example of that. It just starts off, I can't remember what came right before it on the playlist, but whatever ended and then this song began, and I was just like, it was Tempest, yeah, it was the tunnel vision. It just Kate rolled in, and I sort of thought, wow, this is such a tiny, delicate little flower of a sound coming out of the guitar that it really moved me. I found it really profound. Her vocals are absolutely stunning throughout, and that really blew me away. I'm not totally as convinced by the tracks where she pushes it harder, like Master Hunter, I think it's called. Is that one of the? Yeah. So the ones where she's a bit more aggressive, actually, where she loses that delicacy somewhat, don't find quite as captivating. I'll put it that way. And the only thing I'll say apart from that is that this album, the only other one I was really familiar with, the Short Movie, and this album blows that album out of the water completely. And I think my impression was slightly skewed on that basis.
Not going to take 90 seconds, it took exactly 90 seconds.
Victory again!
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that. We'll talk about, but just the fact that you've always judged Laura Marling on a short movie was very upsetting to me, because it's definitely her worst album.
Everything before that.
Right.
Well, I'll be doing your playlist in a couple of episodes' time, so you know.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay, do you want to time me again, Sam?
Okay.
So easily, without a doubt, the album and artist that grew on me the most from this list was Lemonade and Beyonce. So that might be partly because she had the most ground to make up, with there only being one album on the playlist I was less looking forward to listening to at the start. but I think it was mainly because Lemonade is a stunning, powerful and engaging album. I love the way it plays out like a film with a clear beginning, middle and end, and I really particularly love the anger and honesty that's put into the beginning part of the story. Early songs like Hold Up, Daddy Lessons and particularly Sorry are so much darker and interesting than anything I've heard Beyonce do before. Sorry I think deserves a particular mention. It's an incredible song. I'd seen all about the line Becky with the good hair that finishes that song all over social media, and I just thought people were being a bit mad and like putting far too much emphasis on it. But the way she ends that song is so well done. It's such a clever piece of songwriting. And I think that leads to another point. The song construction across the piece is so spot on. And I think the album then moves towards more reconciliation in the second half of the album, and I think it's slightly less powerful, but still feels honest, and I think All Night is a great tune. It feels particularly important that she finished the album off with another version of Sorry though. I think that as much of the album does, it's a reminder that she's not someone to be fucked with, and it's just really strong. And all of that's without mentioning the strong message of black feminism throughout, which is a big part of a few songs, and I just think it's a really, really deserving choice for album of the decade. 90 seconds, we've got it this 90 seconds, Lars.
Yeah, we're used to it now.
Killing it.
All right.
Okay.
So we just got to chat about the ones that we just went through. If they're not
Sam's not
mentioned.
been yet.
Sam's not gone. I'm sorry. I
Nick,
apologise.
I'm hosting Nick. Sit down, be quiet, let me do
I'm
it.
not going to say anything else the rest of the podcast.
Just keep getting in the way. It's terrible. Right, Sam. 90 seconds. Artist or album that grew on you the most. Go.
So it's not one that's been talked about, so that's good.
Cool.
So mine was Beck, Morning Phase. So I was aware of it, and I had listened to it a couple of times before, and mainly because of it being nominated for the Grammys and winning Album of the Year against Beyonce by Beyonce. A fact that I'm still kind of pissed off by, and I'm still not going to let him get away with that. But I really, really got into this album like over this period, and I think it's the one on the list that I'm like, I feel like if I was going to go back and really listen to any of them and become a big fan of that off the back of it, I think this would be it. I've enjoyed some of Beck's other albums, but I really love how like dreamlike most of it is. It's kind of, it has this kind of folk country vibe, but then it kind of goes into like kind of soundscapey stuff at other times, and but then other bits of it are super catchy. Like Heart Is a Drum is just like a super pop tune, and yet is done in this like delicate way. I just found it really, really interesting, and it's kind of like there's something like contemplative about the whole thing. I think Pete wrote on the website about it that it felt like a warm hug to him, and I was like, I totally got that when I was listening to it. I just, yeah, it was definitely the one that kind of improved most for me.
You took an extra second there, Sam. We might have to take a second off your next.
Lose some points for that.
Okay, so that's it. We've talked about Laura Marling and Kendrick already. So anyone want to talk about Beyonce or Beck?
I'm happy to talk about Beyonce.
Go for it, mate.
I'll be honest and say I've always been pretty sceptical about Beyonce because I found her voice across most of the things I've heard over the years to be way too turn it up to 11 like volume and sort of power, too powerful to be subtle. And then I've also been a big fan of Solange's work and always felt like it was a bit frustrating that Solange is so tiny in profile compared to Beyonce, when Solange does, to me, more interesting and creative things and has a more sort of more dynamics in her vocals. But we'll say that I'm willing to forgive her as well the rip-off of Yeah Yeahs, because that really annoyed me that she's used the lyrics in Yeah Yeahs.
Rip-off is a sample.
Yeah, it's a sample.
Well, a sample. She's used the lyrics from it. It's not even a sample. She's lifted the lyrics. I know it's intentional.
Do you want to talk about interpolation? Go like Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
that's true. So I'm going to forgive her that though, because actually I thought the album was really thoughtful and sort of engaging, and I thought the single focus of this topic about the betrayal was really well put together. I'd say 9% of the time, maybe 8% of the time, I thought her voice didn't get in the way of that. The power of her voice didn't get in the way of that. There were still points, I haven't known an actual track down, but there were still points where she seemed a bit too shouty, but that wasn't the majority of it. So, I thought overall it was definitely glad it was on the list. Wouldn't have made my top 5, but it was on the list. I'm glad.
I was expecting this from you.
Yeah.
I thought it might be your most underwhelming, but I think I know what that is.
So I'll talk about Beyonce. Obviously,
Do it.
you all know that I absolutely love Beyonce.
Yeah.
This will not come as a surprise that I love this album.
Mhm.
That it is Beyonce's best album
Okay.
by far.
Okay.
The biggest change of this decade is the fact that Beyonce ended up releasing good albums. I absolutely loved Beyonce before, but she was a singles artist, she was a videos artist, she was a performing artist. And I think this decade she's had 2 in a row that have been outstanding pieces of work. And this especially, it's just so much more personal to her. Every song of hers, she's had so many things about being kind of like, I caught you out cheating, like all of this, but none of it has felt genuine.
Yeah.
Up until this point. It's like she's literally had about 10 hit singles that are literally that topic. And yet now, on an album where you have that flow and you have that story through it, but the genius thing about the record is that it manages to use a personal story to have a cultural and much more kind of message of overall kind of like feminism, and then also like equality, and the kind of she's hitting on things that are so much bigger than her own story, but using the personal story to tell that. So then when you get to the end and you get to Formation, it's like, it feels like that is a culmination of everything that she's just talked about on the entire album, and this is it. This is like a call to arms of like, here it is. I find it so interesting that ends the album, because All Night, and you said about Sorry ending it, I think that was added
Is
recently.
that just an alternate one, right?
So
Okay.
that was only when it was uploaded to Spotify, which was like last year. So the album usually ends just with Formation at the end, which was the single, was the going into it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that it's kind of, it's not separate, but it kind of forms this finale.
I think that's when I was saying about it being like a film. That for me is like the end credits, like when the end of the story's ended and then you have Formation.
I've seen the film.
I watched it over the last month.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and yeah, for me, like in terms of performers, I do think she's probably one of, if not the best live performer I've ever seen. I think in terms of a performer star, you can't really go much better than her this decade, I think.
We are giving everyone the artist of the decade mantle here, aren't we? But she is another one that deserves.
I'd say probably less so personally for other people, but for me, definitely.
And in terms of what she's achieved and what she's done this year, this decade, even if it's not always my favourite stuff, but I love this album. But in terms of what she's done musically, it is very impressive. How about you, Matt? Where did you come up with Beyonce album?
I loved it. She's a cultural phenomena, like, and this really is the culmination of that. Like, she revealed herself as a real human being, I think. Which is, for someone in like the genre that she'd been ascribed to and stuff like that, to actually come out and be very real and very honest about all the stuff that's going on. The album's super interesting and made her way more, the music and herself, way more interesting to me because of that.
Same.
Because it felt substantial, and then seeing like all the stuff around it, like the movie, her performance at the Super Bowl, it felt like probably the biggest cultural moment musically this decade. I don't know. Yeah. It just, all of it happening at once was just, everyone couldn't stop talking about it.
Cool.
Yeah, this was my other pick for maybe the album that
grew on you the most.
Grew on me the most.
Cool. Anyone for Beck?
That's great. Sure.
I've got no comments on that right now.
I can say it was a pleasant surprise to me, the Beck album. Like, he's not someone that's done a lot for me in the past, but this is a really beautiful album. Very soothing. I like the whole piece. The songs melt into each other. I really like tracks like Morning, Heart as a Drum, Blackbird Chain. But Pete said in his description when he chose his album of the decade, that it's a grower, not a shower. And I think if this was on any other playlist we did this year, I might have got more into it. But I think it suffered from being alongside a lot of more immediate albums. Of the 2 or 3 very gentle albums on this list, I think it was probably the least interesting to me. But I'll come back and say that it's a ridiculously strong list, and the only negatives I have to say about it are in comparison to some really other good pieces of work. So, yeah. How about you, Matt? Are you...
Yeah, I'm a fan of Beck, and I think there's two versions of Beck, and this is the one version of Beck that I don't like.
Okay.
It's a bit kind of dreary. He should be making bold and brash alt pop. I think that's where his strength lies.
Okay.
I don't think it lies in this. I think it falls pretty flat. It's not particularly engaging. Like, I listened to it when it came out and I was disappointed. And so re-listening to it's been quite hard.
Okay.
But like, he's hugely talented, and it surprised me how much how lauded this album is. But I can also recognize that this is particularly a kind of music that just rarely connects with me, and so that's probably why I'm so down on it.
Fair enough. That is allowed.
But yeah,
Okay.
it's maybe my least favorite album by him.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Next question time. So the next question that we will all answer is, what was your favourite discovery on the playlist? And we're going to start with Nick.
Okay.
Go.
I'm going to do under a minute this time.
I mean, you keep taking 20 seconds to tell us how long you're going to take.
It's going.
I've got time to spare, it's fine. Favourite discovery is the Fionn Regan's album. Never heard of Fionn Regan at all. No awareness of this, and not really a genre as Fran will probably confirm that I'm that familiar with in folk. Don't really know too much about it in general. This was a really beautiful album and really delicately put together, and also a really easy flow to it that felt like it was almost recorded in one take. I mean, each track, but maybe even the whole album recorded in one take, which I know is not true, but it's a really impressive kind of control and sort of smoothness to the way you move through all the tracks. I loved 67 Blackout. Particularly, it's my favourite track on the album because of the juxtaposition between the scary kind of opening lyric, the kind of dark side of putting the knife under the flame and all that sort of stuff, juxtaposed with the really sunny, delicate and sunny vocals that he was doing, sort of dressing over the top of that. So I really loved it. I think it's an excellent piece of work, and I'm really glad I discovered it. This is why this list was worthwhile to me, to discover things like this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. It's going to be me next. So Sam, would you mind? I just need to find my notes, so talk among yourselves for about 7 or 10 minutes.
You're losing time.
Professionals
Yeah,
always.
exactly. Clock's ticking.
Can't start yet. Okay, I'm ready. Go. So my favourite discovery was Rise Ye Sunken Ships by the Augustines. I think, what an album. I think it's so powerful, so raw, so clearly comes from a place of pain. I think I read, and I don't know this for sure, but I think I read that this was following the death of his wife, and if we compare this to another album that nearly made this list about the death of someone's wife, it just shows what you can do with those emotions. I think the lead singer delivery throughout it is just so on the edge. You feel like he's going to crack or crumble at any point. And this, on top of the simple but stirring instrumentation, is really, really effective. I can also see links between this and some of my favourite bands, and I think it's just a kind of songwriting that really appeals to me. I believe this band called Time on their career last year, which is pretty upsetting. I can imagine it'd be a really good live show. And again, it's one of those albums where I could pick out most of the songs as a favourite, but I'll mention in particular Philadelphia, Chapel Song and Augustine as particular highlights. And I think of all the things that were completely new to me on this playlist, which was a few, I think 6, this is the one that will stay on regular rotation.
Okay.
With 20 seconds to spare.
Nice. Easy.
Nice.
Too easy.
Sam next. Give me a second to reset the timer. Go, Sam. Favourite discovery?
So my favourite discovery was Kiasmos.
Okay.
Kiasmos? How do you say that? I don't know.
Kiasmos.
So that self-titled album. I really liked, actually in this playlist it really stands out as the only thing mildly resembling dance music at all, or electronic music. And I loved the slow build of everything. It was like everything was on the verge of just exploding into something, but it never really does, and that kind of happens for the whole of the kind of 30-40 minute of the record. The use of this parts where strings will just float in and then float back out, and it really excited me. It was really I'd never ever heard of them, and I don't know if anyone else had.
No, not heard of them at all.
No.
I think I can really hear why it's the sort of album that if I spent ages and ages with and kept listening to, that I could really feel some sort of connection with it. It was really nice to have an instrumental record as well, that was kind of, you could just lose yourself in. It really stood out on this list, and it was definitely my favourite discovery.
Nicely done, mate. 7 seconds to spare.
Cool.
So we have Matt left as favourite discovery. Go, Matt.
My favourite discovery was also Kiasmos.
Oh wow.
I thought I could use a lot of the same descriptors as Sam in this. I got completely lost in this album. It was perfectly situated in the playlist to kind of disappear into, and then the way I just think the way the beats with they were just so warm and comforting, and then they layer on the the synths and strings on top of that in a very delicate way. It really kind of drew me in, and then it would just build into these slow crescendos without ever being overly dramatic. It really was almost meditative listening to it. It was interesting to have something that was so minimal, and it's like this minimal techno record, but it still was able to convey something that was very human and emotional at the same time. So I was kind of blown away by this. My first time I listened to it, I was just like, this is not like anything on here, and I'm totally down to just stay on this for a while. I was super happy to find this.
Great.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Brilliant. Should we go through in the order then? Nick spoke about Fionn Regan. I feel like I should probably, as my girlfriend chose it as her album of the decade, I should probably get involved.
Go for it.
Weirdly,
dig in.
Me and Kirsten talked about this quite a lot over the month, trying to predict who might choose it as favourite discovery, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if Matt or Sam did, but there's no way Nick will. So there you go. I've been truly shocked by that.
Excellent. Glad to oblige.
So yeah, as this was my girlfriend's choice, it's probably quite obvious that I'm already pretty familiar with Fionn and his work. But in all honesty, it's been usually listening to the odd song by him and seeing him live rather than actually spending time with an album. So this was a bit of a strange one for me at first. It was both very familiar but also quite new to me in its full form. It's a much quieter work than a lot of the others on the list, so it took some time to stand out, but when the album did hit, I just found it really, really soothing. It's just a really simple, stunningly beautiful piece of work with outstanding poetry throughout, I think. I think it's really great how open he is about his introvert nature, and I think that's just a really interesting concept to do an album about how introverted you are. It's fascinating. And I think it kind of really transported me somewhere else and really helped with my stress a couple of times this month. I've had quite a heavy month at work, and this album just calmed me down. It's a bit like meditation, but for people who don't have time to sit around with their legs crossed and their eyes closed. So, again, for me, too many songs to mention, but I will mention 67 Blackout, which Nick mentioned, St. Anthony's Fire, which is stunning, Midnight Ferry Crossing, which is beautiful, and Anchor Black Tattoo, all brilliant. So yeah, Matt or Sam, Fionn?
I definitely enjoyed this album, but I think if you looked at my whole list ranked, it would seem quite low, I think, on it.
Yeah.
I think that my biggest problem is that I feel like this is an album that's begging to be played in one go live. I think it feels like a live album at times because it's so stark and empty, and it's just him.
Yeah.
And just the way that he plays guitar is so delicate that often I'd find it really hard to get into that zone of being able to just listen to that. I think the other kind of acoustic-led albums on this list kind of have a lot more to them, so are a bit more easy to jump in and out of. I think with this, which probably did it a disservice for me, because I do think this is something that I really, really get into, and I don't think he done much else.
He's got quite a few albums, yeah. He had a new one this year called Calla. His favourite album for me, my favourite album of his is from 2007, I think, so I wouldn't have been able to make this list, but I think it's called Be Good or Be Gone. It's got a couple more sort of immediate songs, so maybe it would stand out a little bit more, but I highly recommend listening to that album. He had one that was not good. He tried to be a bit more rocky, and it didn't really work. Yeah. But in general, he's great. You know, all of his stuff's good.
His voice on it is just so easy to listen to. It's just effortless.
Yeah.
Matt?
So I have a slight issue in the fact that I didn't realise this was on the list because it wasn't allowed on my Spotify.
Oh, wow.
So,
So he's listening furiously right now as we're talking.
yeah, like, I can tell you how I think of Fionn Regan, and it's mostly just similar feelings to what Sam just said. I like it, but it's never never felt like the right setting for me.
I think it's a real shame you didn't get to hear this album this month, really, because I think you would love it.
Yeah, I was like, as soon as Nick said it, I was
so.
furiously double checking my Spotify, and I can see that it is.
Well, that's amazing.
Not
okay,
available.
Well, Kirsten's going to be very upset because
sorry,
that's
Kirsten.
points now because of you.
Disappointing, yeah. Just give him 10 points. Why not just give him 10 points on the off
I think we
chance?
give automatic 10 points to Fionn for that reason.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm going
enough.
to listen to it on my own time.
So what came
when I can figure out where to listen to
We
it.
talked about
Augustines, didn't I? Anyone
and
else?
Kiasmos.
Anything else to say about Augustines?
Augustines, I think it's just not. It didn't really feel like my thing. It was
I can totally get that.
a bit much at times for me. I got that emotion that you're talking about, and I think in the context, and when you read about the context of the album, it does make a lot more sense. But I think just for me, wasn't really my thing.
Didn't grab you.
Yeah.
Fair play.
I could jump in on Augustines, yeah. So there were times in the album when it really, really was able to carry me along. It had a lot of great sort of gutsy energy, you know, kind of really threw everything at the wall, kind of like go for it kind of mentality. And a lot of the time it did carry me with that, and I enjoyed it on that basis. I also thought it was quite like some early Arcade Fire, which is a band I really like, especially the early stuff. But there were times when it seemed a bit too, it hit the acoustic stuff too hard, like East Los Angeles was a track that I felt was like too, I've used that word before, but too shouty, too much like overloading the mic kind of sensibility, which I was a bit of a bit disappointing after some other bits that I'd really, really enjoyed. And there were also Headlong in the Abyss is another one I noted down as for better or worse, and you can make your own judgment. This reminded me a lot of Springsteen. Like this is a Springsteen type track.
I believe they are fans.
Kind of like they are fans. Yeah. Okay, like a really kind of like throw everything at it. Like let's just pay your heart out, you know. And again, you can like it or not, but that's what it was shooting for. I felt like. So yeah, a mixed bag a little bit, but there were definitely things I enjoyed about it. Yeah, so definitely. Good. Yeah.
Cool. Matt.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I'm very unsurprised that Fran picked this. I can see Frightened Rabbit and The National all over it.
Yeah, Frightened Rabbit were one of the ones I really wanted to compare to it,
yeah. Yeah, they're great. And it felt very anthemic, very emo, like very emo, more emo than I was expecting. But I enjoyed it. I found it sometimes it was a bit too emo, just because it felt really sad sometimes. It felt almost like a Coen Brothers.
As far as call it emo, like when you say emo, I think of like. Although I had this conversation with someone the other day, I think I just don't understand what emo is because I presumed it was all goth, but apparently emo is like
No.
You just.
No, we've listened.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair enough.
It's fine.
Go for it.
But yeah, it felt like a Coen Brothers film. It just felt like everything was going wrong for the protagonist and nothing good was going to happen.
Would you say that most of the albums on this playlist feel like there's not many where everybody's going swimmingly and everyone's really happy?
I love that, Matt.
Okay.
But yeah. But I enjoyed it a lot. It was a nice new addition for me.
Does
anyone for Kiasmos? Do you want to go first?
Go for it.
Me go first. I'm glad that people spoke about this album because Fat Roland chose it and he's a big electronic music fan. I'm glad other people than me spoke about it because I don't feel qualified to say anything about this album. This type of like electronic lyricless music is probably my weakest spot when it comes to critiquing music. That said, I did think it was quite beautiful. It did grow on me a little bit. It commands attention without any words, which is a big achievement in my eyes. But because of my inherent struggles with this genre, it was pretty low on my list when I came to creating my list. It's just not my thing, really.
Okay. And for me, some overlap a little bit. I really enjoyed the sort of dynamic builds in the songs, and I really overall enjoyed the album. I thought it was well put together, and some really kind of nasty synths in there, which I really like. Particularly the song "Bent" was one of my favourite tracks. It was just these vicious little grinding synths in the background, which were great. Having no lyrics is hardly something you can criticise the album for, but it's difficult for me to speak to an album that doesn't have words in it. That's just something that's so important to me. It's I just find it hard to communicate in a way with the music in that sense. But that's not a criticism of the album. That's just a criticism of me, I suppose, and my limited assessment of the genre.
As well.
But yeah, so but no, I did enjoy it, and I would probably listen to it again in a certain mood. I think it was very calming as well. I think somebody else said it was calming, so that worked well for me. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, on to our last of 4 questions. I'm going to start this time, so Sam, if you could time me. So the last question is, which album from the list would be the most underwhelming winner of the album of the decade?
This is going to be so easy to get. Go on.
Yeah, I know what yours is, I think, but I'll go now. So I'd say there's only one album on this entire list that is just totally not for me.
Sorry, Mike.
And with apologies to Joe Shervin, who picked it as his album of the decade.
Oh, he didn't do it.
I have to say that album is Father John Misty's I Love You Honey Bear.
Totally staggered.
After Nick chose Pure Comedy as his album of the year on the podcast a couple of years ago, I was already nervous to listen to this album because I hated that one. But I was hopeful that it might show me a less smug and preachy side of Father John, and that I might start to understand the fuss about him a little bit. It almost did that on occasion. I prefer the album to Pure Comedy, and I would even go as far as to say I almost enjoy the song True Affection. But other than that, I have to say I'm still at a total loss. First of all, anyone who opens an album with a song calling his wife his honey bear is off to a bad start with me. The second song, Chattow Lobby, sums up everything I can't get into about this artist. It's overblown, it's smug, it's light and airy, it's totally patronising. He rescues himself a little bit with the song True Affection, which is the best thing I've heard by him. But other than that, I'm totally struggling. I just don't get the fuss around this guy. I don't like his voice. The instrumentation's horrible.
I don't like his face.
I don't like his face. I really don't like his face. I just don't like anything about him. Sorry, Joe, but it sucks.
Yeah, that's really harsh for Joe.
Okay.
I like that we said we were going to be like not that harsh about these.
Yeah, I did actually suggest that, and Fran said no worries.
No, I mean,
we'll be
people
fine.
know when if they're putting an album to Picky Bastards, they know that they might get slated, right? And
This is their albums of the decade. Fucking hell,
well,
man.
it shouldn't be, should it? Sorry, Joe, but there's better albums out there, mate.
Okay.
Love you though, Joe. You're a good lad. So next we will go to Sam. Go, Sam.
Okay, so I've written down "Don't be too harsh on it, Sam," with an exclamation mark again, because this is
Cross that out.
absolutely no surprise. But mine is Swans. The second.
Okay, now I can say sorry, Mike.
Of everything on this list, I can honestly say I did not want to go and listen to it twice. I was an
Gotta let it grow on you, man.
I was an hour into the album, thinking,
was 3
surely
songs.
this must be over soon. And I checked, and I was 3 tracks in, and I still had an hour to go. And one of the songs is 30 minutes long. And in that 30 minutes, I felt like it did 3 different things.
Yeah.
As in, at all, over 30 minutes. Which, if an album had done that, with some of these albums are nearly as short as that song, we would be
It's longer than the Snowmine.
going crazy at it, wouldn't we? So I had this conversation with Mike about this album a few days ago, and his answer was, "It's hard work." I'm like, it's too hard work. I do not want to do that work.
I don't want to do that work.
So I'm sorry, Mike. You absolutely love this. It's like if an album it takes 40 hours to get into it, that's 40 hours I'd rather be doing anything else.
Yeah, fair play. Okay, you have 5 seconds left, so you nailed that. Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Matthew Paul for his most... Oh, that just went off. There was no need for it.
God.
Matt, go. Most underwhelming winner.
This was hard. I'm picking Alt J. I love this album so much.
Oh, you
but
do?
in the
Okay.
context of everything else, I just don't think it's special. And so that's why I picked it for this. I think they're just a fantastic... This is just fantastic. I've listened to this album so much. It is...
Backtracking furiously as he says it.
It's not sensational. It's not something that we're going to look back on as one of the best albums ever made. I don't think. I think it's like a perfect album to put on at a party, and that's what it is. And so I don't know. It's just a whole thing. They have a whole distinctive voice and vision, and they're interesting. But I think in the context of what's happened since as well, I think they've suffered a little bit from people aping them a little bit.
Stop stealing my notes. Carry on.
What?
Stop stealing my notes, but carry on.
Yeah, and so there is that feeding into this, but I think there is something to be said with, like, I don't know if you've seen that video of people pretending to be Alt J and they just make random noises. it's like, it's very effective because it is true. And so I kind of with regret am saying this is my underwhelming album.
I mean, every time I get to play that, it's very satisfying. Sounds a bit like one of the Alt J tracks, I think. Okay, Nick, I mean, I feel like I might be able to guess this, and we may be double apologising to James Spearing here, but let's see. Let's see,
shall we? This is the one that's going to be hard to get through in 90 seconds. We've got so much to say. Most underwhelming is Beck.
Oh, wow.
And the reason is, I absolutely love Beck. I think he's a fantastic performer. He's done so much great stuff over the years. Midnight Vultures is an amazing album, Odelay, whatever, all great stuff. This album is absolutely immaculate. It's produced unbelievably. It's probably got the single best recording of an acoustic guitar I have ever heard on a record in Say Goodbye, and that's a lot of acoustic guitars even on this playlist, which is better than in terms of recording. The track Wave is also completely captivating. However, the album is a complete rip-off of an album he already released about 10 years ago called Sea Change, which is just disgraceful. Take I Guess What I'm Doing. Take I Guess What I'm Doing Fine as a good example of that, and how much it's similar to almost everything on this album. So if you've not heard Sea Change, then this is great and you can enjoy it. Otherwise, I think it's an unbelievably lazy move for somebody who's so innovative in general to release an album that's basically the same album they already released once anyway. So there you go, under 90 seconds. I managed to pull it off.
Nice. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's the questions over. So we spoke about Beck. Everyone spoke about Beck now. Let's go to Alt J. Do you know what? I'll go first just because my points are almost identical to Matt's. I was a big fan on release, and at the time, I think they were innovative and a bit different. Matilda and Tessellate are both really involving songs. The instrumentation's interesting. Oh!
That's sharp now, that's it. And your comments.
And it was an interesting nostalgia exercise for me. But I think, as Matt said, it looks less impressive these days as other things have come along and surpassed them. And for me, it would be nowhere near a conversation about album of the decade. I mean, it wouldn't be near a conversation of the album of the year that year. So it's fun, it's lively, it's interesting at times, but it hasn't really stood the test of the time that well in my eyes. So sorry, James, but you are wrong.
Okay, I'll go in, shall I?
I thought this would be your most underwhelming because I know you're not a fan.
No. But it is a very mixed bag, really, at best. They sound to me a lot of the time like a barbershop quartet. Trying to do indie music instead of just singing, at like school fetes and stuff. It's pretty annoying. Their vocals are actually very nasal, given the fact that they're focusing so much on vocals. Their vocals are actually pretty nasal and irritating in that respect. I do like synths. Some of the synths they built in some of the songs, like in Tessellate, for example. I thought that worked pretty well. And there were some bits of the album that I would listen to again. I enjoyed it. I wasn't really into them when they first came out in the first place, actually. So it's not as I have an emotional connection. And I probably don't know I'll fuss with them again. But they were. It was okay. But certainly to put them on this list. I mean, this overall, I'll just say was a great list. Yeah. Overall, we'll talk more about it, I'm sure. But this album was certainly near the bottom of it for me.
Okay. I'll disagree with all of you, except Matt maybe, because Matt actually really liked it.
Really liked it.
I didn't like it, yeah.
I love this album, it's crap.
I really like Alt J. It's my kind of like indie pop music. Okay. I think at the time when they came out, there was a bunch of bands that came out at the same time, like Everything, Django. There was a bunch. They were all kind of Mercury nominated. I mean, Alt J won the Mercury for this. Yeah.
Everything's kicks this band's arse, though.
Oh, I'm not disputing that. But for me personally, I much prefer their later albums than this.
Okay.
I think the second album, This Is All Yours, does what this is trying to do much better. I think they leaned a lot harder into the kind of pop space because of the way that they sing, and the kind of, I think that movement allowed for the songs to kind of breathe a bit more. It's not as kind of, this is all a bit random, this is all a bit kind of off kilter kind of thing, which in some ways, some songs really works. I actually really like this. I do like this album. It's not the Alt J album I would pick.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you guys would have thought I would have picked this as my number 5 on my list.
I didn't know your feelings on this album, actually. I thought everybody would find it equally underwhelming.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so then how about what do we got?
Swans? Do you want to start with Swans?
Swans, yeah, Swans. I'll go with that, shall I?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
It was. I was essentially eavesdropping on that conversation between Sam and Mike about how hard work is required for good albums. And I would certainly come down on Mike's side about the idea that you should be willing to invest a lot of time in albums which are sometimes arduous to get through to the process of recognition of what's great about them. This album has really strong elements to it which I enjoyed, and I certainly would not say it's probably in the top half of my list overall. It's certainly not an easy listen.
Just a massive eye roll.
Tracks like The Seer Returns, which is my favourite album on the track, have this kind of hypnotic set of transitions that are really kind of hard to escape from in a way that you kind of feel like it's swallowed by them, which I think is kind of intriguing and interesting. So, and I also like Mother of the World, but overall, I mean, it's not. They're not in my top 3, say, but they're good. It's a good album, an interesting band, and I think I'm glad that they're on the list. I'm glad that something like this is on the list. Not there's many things like this, but an album that's not obvious is great to see that kind of left field choice. So that's good. So
Matt, Swans.
I didn't dislike this album, but I wouldn't love it. I think it's huge. It's like dark, brooding, oppressive. For me, it was like the tone of it was just the diametric opposite of Kiasmos. And I did enjoy
reasons, though. No, I feel like it's intriguing for similar reasons.
I found it super interesting, but this isn't going to be something I'm like dying to get back to. It felt like with all the chanting and the kind of repetitive nature of it, it felt almost cultish, and I don't know.
I think it's set.
Yeah. It set its stall out really early with Lunacy, and the big problem for me with this album is it didn't reach that high again. Lunacy was for me the best thing on the track, the album.
Why can't you say album probably?
I don't know.
You both said the track. I'm just being a dick now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nick confused me.
Is that you?
But yeah, I just don't think it. Yeah, I just don't think it gets back to that. And if all of it was as good as Lunacy, then I would be rating it as high as Kiasmos, I think.
Okay. So for me, I mean, I admire and respect Swans actually as a band. I don't know why Nick was so adamant that I wouldn't like this, because we did go and see them together, and we've also seen the previous album.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think Mike was right in his write-up when he said that if you have the patience, they do reward you with some exquisite moments, but I think the important word there is patience. You really do need a lot of it. For me, it's very rare that I can sit and listen to a 2-hour album, and I think this needs to be, digested in that way. I also think that To Be Kind, the album we did as a classic on a podcast a long time ago, it is a better album. That was also this decade. I think it took less work and it gave more reward. All of that said, I think the things that make Swans difficult for me at times, their aggression, their slow builds, their repetition, are what makes them so good at what they do and why people like them so much. So if this music is your kind of thing, I think Swans are unmatched in that respect, but it's just not entirely my kind of thing. But I certainly didn't dislike it.
Okay. Wow.
Brilliant.
I'm surprised.
So, then we've got Father John Misty, haven't we? Anyone kicking on Father John?
I've had so many people tell me that I should listen to Father John Misty, and I just haven't, for whatever reason, not out of like spite or anything. I just have never ever got around to it. So this is the first album I've actually listened to, and I enjoyed it. I can see why people were suggesting it to me. That kind of like country-ish, like folk kind of meets electronic sounds. Those moments are kind of the best for me on it, but I think I kind of need a bit more context of him as an artist to kind of get into the album, and I found amongst this list it kind of got a bit lost in some of the other albums that had that were just a bit more interesting off the get-go, or did this kind of thing a bit better than this album did. But I did enjoy it. I wouldn't say it was like out and out my favourite thing, but I also, it's on the bottom half of my list, definitely.
Okay. Matt?
Did Matt speak?
Yeah, I agree. I've tried to listen to him a bunch, and he's never connected with me. It's a bit too hammy,
Yes.
a bit too over the top. Like, he's funny, and the fact that he put like a laugh track in one of his songs
so smug.
to kind of, I think that's
Look how funny I am.
smart.
I'm even laughing at
I
myself.
think he's meant to be sarcastic, isn't he?
I think so too.
it's a parody.
Self-deprecating.
I think I think it's very clever,
Sorry, Joe.
but like it all just didn't connect. Sometimes it just felt a bit too much like the songs themselves felt too much like I was listening to like not good Elton John. And
Good Elton. That's brilliant.
it's this style that I just struggle with. So
I think
Not
so.
I
Good
couldn't get
Elton
past
John.
with this.
Not good Elton John. I mean, that is a bigger insult than
Yeah.
anything I said about this
Fran
album.
thinks Elton John is not good Elton John, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Elton John is terrible, so if this is not good Elton John...
Elton John's not terrible.
He's got some
he's got a good
Classics.
song.
Okay, let's not get into this conversation. It's so relevant right now. Come on, focus, people.
Nick, Father John Misty?
Yeah, I found it to be like the other one that I put up before, Pure Comedy, to be really witty, really clever, self-deprecating at times, which Fran won't see.
The guy loves himself so much, it's...
But to me, the only thing I would hold it back is that I do prefer the other album quite a bit because of the political sort of connotations that it runs through it, which this is much more a sort of personal narrative. And I think the notion of it being quite a small scale album is quite sweet, but it doesn't really doesn't give quite as much back to me as the politically motivated Pure Comedy does. And yeah, I think that's okay. And I personally would just put on record that I think saying Honey Bear, I'll put in that title Honey Bear in the title word Honey Bear, and in the opening track is very vulnerable and open and kind of a bold thing to do. And just because Fran is a miserable git, it doesn't mean other people can't refer to each other affectionately.
It's just gross, man.
Anyway, that's
I don't think she ever gets named in this album. She just gets called Honey Bear. I mean, how more white male privilege can you get than this album, really?
He has a name for her, which is an affectionate name.
But
it's not an insult.
It's just... Yeah, anyway, let's move on.
Jesus.
We only have
Is
two albums.
Honey Bear actually your pet name, Fran?
Yeah,
Is that why it's kind of so close to the
He's
line?
annoyed that somebody stole it, yeah.
Let's move on anyway. We got through most of the albums. There's only two albums
two
we haven't
left.
discussed, which is Snowmine's Laminate Pet Animal and PJ Harvey's Let England Shake. So
Let's go with
we might
Snowmine
have to start
first.
with Snowmine, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, host. I'm
only
hosting.
just- I'm allowed to have an opinion.
Sam, start us up for Snowmine.
This was one of the biggest surprises for me, I think. I really, really enjoyed this album. I think it stands out because it's probably the most straightforward on the whole list. And it's just a straightforward pop album that was the vibe I got, and it was quite nice to just have like just songs with hooks and choruses, and it's weird to say that it's really nice to have something that's a lot more straightforward than these really interesting albums, which is why it kind of sits in the middle of the list for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. I think Let Me In was probably my highlight. I really like how his like vocals, he goes like up an octave on the chorus, and it's kind of like I really enjoyed it.
Great.
Right.
Who wants to go next?
We're not allowed to go. We
You
have
go,
to wait
Nick.
for you
I'll
to
allow
tell
you
us.
to go next.
I'll go.
please.
In that case,
Speak, please. Sam.
this is one of the only bands on the list one of two or three that I didn't know at all, and in general, they're a bit I enjoyed, but it was very, very shiny. It was very clean.
We've had Nick's mention of the word shiny for the episode. There has to be one every episode.
Yeah,
it was,
bingo.
it was, yeah, that's fine. I'm
bingo.
happy to go with that. So yeah, it was very shiny, and that was a little bit difficult. It was a bit Vampire Weekend for me, which is not a band I like. So I had a tough time with it, to be honest. I think some of the songs like Penny and The Hill were a bit much in terms of that sweetness, that sort of slightly, that bit overly sugary for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't really a big fan, honestly. But there were bits were okay, but wouldn't put it at the top of my list.
Matt?
I really like this. It was really interesting. I think, again, I agree with Sam. It was really nice to have a very clean indie pop record in the middle. It felt like a palate cleanser, but I think it had the potential to be a much more interesting album. I think the musicality of it is super interesting. The way it is very indie pop, but it has a lot more layered on it than I would say kind of a lot of other indie pop stuff has. But because of the genre of it is, that it felt almost generic, and that did take away from me really, really wanting to listen to the album over and over again. It made it less interesting because of that. Because there is so much of this style of music. I could write a list 20, 30 long of bands it sounded like.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as special.
That's quite interesting to me, because one of my points I've put is I find them pretty unique, and I can't really think of many bands to compare them to.
Really?
Yeah, and I genuinely can't.
I'll send you the list on email.
Maybe it's just not a type of music I listen to a lot, but I can't think of any bands that I would immediately compare them to. Name me a couple, since you've got this 30 list.
Grizzly Bear?
Grizzly Bear?
Ah.
I mean,
yeah.
Grizzly Bear. I can see it. I love Grizzly Bear. I didn't really... Yeah, I can see it a little bit, I suppose.
No, just soaring indie pop music.
Yeah, I can see
strings.
that. Interesting.
I mean, for me, I was kind of drawn into this album pretty quickly, and at the start it was probably one of my favourite new discoveries. I really like the songs Danger in the Snow and Let Me In, but a lot of the stuff that I didn't already know on this album, such as Augustines and Beyonce, really grew on me as time went on, and this one ungrew on me, if anything. It fell off me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I still think it's a good album, but for me it suffered slightly because it was on such a strong playlist. I think if there's been another week where we'd had a relatively weak playlist, I might have got a lot more out of this, but it didn't do a lot for me.
That's fair to say for a caveat for all these, really. I mean, this list is
such a strong list.
Yeah,
the ones that come
it's
to
very hard to compete with some great stuff.
Is that everyone on Snowmine?
Yes.
So, Let England Shake, PJ Harvey. I think we know someone who's a bit of a PJ Harvey fan in this room, so maybe we'll start with him.
It's been kind of incredible that we've not spoken about PJ Harvey until the very end. This was another one of my possible albums of the decade. I think with the Kate Tempest, with the Kendrick that I picked, and then with Nick Cave's Skeleton Tree. I don't really know where to begin, really. I haven't got long. So I'll just say that I think it's an absolutely stunning, coherent, beautifully crafted, thoughtful, mature piece of work from somebody who has already got, for me, the last 2 decades, album of the decades, of both PJ Harvey. So that was one thing I just sort of felt like, wow, can I really do 3 decades in a row of PJ Harvey here? And I would say In the Dark Places is very likely my song of the decade from a lyrical standpoint, melodically, and I'll just, for the technical side, the kick drum sound in that song is it's just magical. The kick drum sound is incredible.
Magical kick drum.
Yeah, exactly.
Good name for a band. You should rename your band.
Magical kick drum, that's good. So I don't know. There's so much to say, but I'll stop there and just say I don't think it's been oversight that it's not been mentioned, because I think it's just not been. Maybe it wasn't anybody's absolute number one, but it was not any discovery to anyone, I imagine. So it wasn't any discovery, and certainly, thankfully, was not anybody's least interested or most underwhelming. Yeah. So yeah, that's me.
I will jump in just because I like annoying Nick a little bit. When I first saw the playlist, I expected PJ Harvey would definitely end up in my top 5, but I think up against a lot of the other things here, I'm not sure it stands up that well as an album. I think there's some really
it's not really coherent, is it?
I think there's some really, really great songs. And In the Dark Places might be my favourite thing by her. And then This Glorious Land, Let England Shake and England are all very good songs. But I also think there's quite a lot of forgettable stuff on there too. Every other song other than them 4 is a little bit forgettable. I think the last 4 songs on the album just do absolutely nothing for me. So the album just kind of peters out completely. So yeah, that's me on Let England Shake, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I might bring it down even more, because I just really couldn't get into this. I've tried listening to PJ Harvey.
Nick's going to cry, man.
Mainly because Nick has told me to, and I feel obliged to at least appease him a bit.
Appease me, nice.
My main thing is I just don't really like her voice, and I know you're gonna.
Wow, I mean that is the thing that would be an impediment you couldn't get past. Do you know what I mean? Same as I would say with
Yeah.
Jay, for example. It's just the voice is just
I
irritating.
found it impossible to get into the album lyrically, and kind of I get how relevant it is, and kind of when it was released, it was like 2011 or something, wasn't it? So it's quite a way back now, and how relevant it was then, and how relevant some of those lyrics feel now is quite scary.
Yeah.
And that's great. I just couldn't. There was just so much holding me back, and I actually agree that I think quite a lot of it was quite forgettable for me. I don't think I could sing you a single.
I think the word I'd go with is nuanced, but you can just say forgettable if you want. If you don't understand what that word means, then that's fine.
In this list, it's like there's so many albums to deal with. It's like every time I would sit down and listen to it, I'd go, oh well, okay, that's happened again. And that's the thing. I just couldn't get into it really. And I've tried with a couple of her other albums as well, and I just don't think she's for me.
Fair play.
Right.
Fair play. Matt, go on. Say it's the worst album you've ever heard. Let's just have that. That'd be amazing.
That would be lying. That would be
No, it's
lying.
nothing like that.
I love this album.
Yeah.
It's a great
Thank
album.
you.
I'd listened to this a lot before this playlist, and I think for me this was one of the hardest to place whether I would put it in the top 5 or not.
Okay.
Which I won't say whether I did. Yeah.
No, don't.
But I think like what Sam said is really, really interesting to because I listened to it a lot when it came out and haven't listened to it much since. Really interesting to re-listen to it in the context of what's going on now, and seeing how it's still relevant, and just it's kind of getting this re-examination of what it's like to be British, and just the musically, I really just like the sound of this. It feels like kind of dusty and echoey. And I really like the way that gives this kind of atmosphere to the album.
Okay.
Amazing.
2 for, 2 against.
I mean, I'm not against this album. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah,
For me,
you are.
PJ
We'd
Harvey,
go with
I
this,
love.
you're against us.
PJ Harvey, I love, and this album has some massive highlights. But I just think when I was comparing it to the other albums, I don't think as an album, I don't find it that interesting as an album. I think it's got some amazing songs, and I really love her. But it's maybe I love a lot of her albums, but it's not in my top 4 or 5 PJ Harvey albums.
Nutter. All right.
Okay.
Score some stuff.
Right. We are now going to find out what the top 5 Picky Bastards albums of the decade are.
Okay.
I'll just tell you a bit about. I'm not going to tell you who, but at the minute we have a really interesting situation with one album being 2 points ahead at the top, and then 3 albums in second, third, and fourth have all currently got the same amount of points.
Wow.
And there's only 2 points in the top 4, and then 2 albums are 4 points below that in joint 5th at the minute. Every single album has made it to someone. We've had 7 top 5 so far, including mine.
Right.
Which I'll tell you for mine first. Actually, since mine's already.
Are you saying everything got points?
Everything so far
That's got some
has
points.
got at least some points. Every
right,
single
okay.
album, which I found really interesting. So for me, I went with Fionn Regan's The Bunkhouse in number 5.
Right.
Bon Iver's 22 A Million in number 4. Beyonce's Lemonade in number 3.
Oh, the top 3.
Yeah, and it nearly beat Laura Marling's Once I Was an Eagle into number 2, but it didn't because it's Laura Marling and I love her. And obviously number 1, Kate Tempest. So that's my top 5.
Right.
Nice.
You guys might have to go a little bit slower so I can write down
Do some calculations.
scores.
Yeah.
You want to go
Sam,
next?
Sam, you want to go?
Do you want me to go? I will go. Okay, so my number 5 is Beck, Morning Phase.
Okay.
I debated over that number 5. My top 4 was pretty much set since
day one.
Since day one. It's not changed. Number 4 is Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
It's Pimp a Butterfly. Number 3 is Lemonade, Beyonce.
Okay.
Okay.
Number 2 is Bon Iver, 22 A Million.
Okay.
And number 1, Laura Marling.
Okay. Right. Okay. Who wants to go next?
Matt.
No. Okay. Number 5, Beyonce.
Okay.
Number 4, Kiasmos.
4th best album of the decade. Kiasmos. That's great.
Yeah, I loved it.
That's great.
Number 3, Kendrick.
Number 3, Kendrick.
Number 2, Kate Tempest.
2 Kate Tempest.
And number 1, Bon Iver.
Are you telling me Laura Marling didn't make your top 5?
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Genuine
She
shock
was-
there.
She was 6.
Okay.
It was her and PJ Harvey on the edge.
So as we're in my house, I assume I get double points. Is that fair to say?
No, you definitely don't.
Okay. So, you ready?
I am.
My number 5 is Laura Marling
Okay.
for 2 points. My number 4 is Fionn Regan.
Wow.
Wow.
Cool.
My number 3 is Kate Tempest
Okay.
for 6.
Okay.
My number 2 is PJ Harvey.
Okay.
And my number 1 is Pimp a Butterfly.
Okay. Right. So I need you three to talk about what you thought of the playlist as a whole while I do some maths.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
So, to me, this was maybe not surprisingly one of the strongest ones we've had. Obviously, it's a massive list, that's the only thing, but it was one of the strongest ones we've had. Overall, there was nothing that I hated on it. In fact, the thing I said I was most annoyed about, the Beck, I absolutely loved it. It's just that it was already been produced 10 years before. It was a bad album, you know? So it's totally stunning.
Yeah.
So what do you both reckon?
I think it's really interesting that we've got a bunch of people who all seem to pick very, very different albums, and yet there's a lot of similarities between a lot of them. I felt like we kind of just like folksy people who kind of push their sound a bit more.
Yeah, where was the black metal?
And then Kendrick Lamar. That's the kind of the vibe I got from the whole list. It was like Bon Iver and the Beck album and the Laura Marling. It's all kind of, but that's good.
You're saying we're dull, are we
But
saying?
they're all very, in terms of the thing that interested me the most was the stuff that I'd either never heard before or that I wouldn't have expected someone would think of it as their album of the decade, because it is such a personal thing of like whatever you've spent your time with and dedicated your time to. So that's why like the Fionn Regan album on there, that's really interesting to me because I've never even heard of them.
Yeah.
Don't know anyone who's ever mentioned that name.
Yeah.
And yet now it's like, no, this is what my decade was. And that's why it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Matt, you got any comments about the list?
Yeah, it's obviously really, really good list. It's interesting to hear what you say, what you're saying, Sam. Because there's like there's a lot of personal albums, but some of these albums are very universal at the same time.
Yeah.
Like we've all come out praising Beyonce, for example, and like everyone in the world, it seems, loves this album and relates to it, which is pretty amazing considering it's also so personal. And so I think there was only one low light in the whole list for me, and that was Beck, but that's just because I got angry at it.
Yeah, I found it a bit annoying as well for that same reason you did, I think, or similar reason to what you did.
But like it's been a good 6 weeks listening to this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just say like the list for me, it was great to have so many albums that I already loved on there. There's a few that I'm already a big fan of, but also I've made some great discoveries. Seeing something like Beyonce just come in and finish in my top 3 in that way was massive for me, because I think it shows something about how my personal taste has changed over the decade as well, and I think doing this podcast has got a big part to play in that. I think I never would have listened to a pop or R&B album prior to doing this, and now Solange and Beyonce would probably both find themselves in my top 20 albums of the decade, which is a bit ridiculous, really.
You got some black metal in the mix as well.
The black metal will never make it, I don't think. But so we have some fascinating results, people.
Okay, let's hear it.
So we have
this is the definitive list. There's all these other lists flying around, Enemy and whatever, Rolling Stone. Who gives a shit about that? This is the list.
This is the most important list
on
of
the
the decade.
matters.
Yes.
And we have 3 albums tied in third, 4th, and 5th, which is...
Are you going to go all the way from the bottom?
Reverse order. So reverse order, even though they're all on the same point, so I can't really do that.
I mean, of the 3 and then...
But I'll do it in order of my favourite of those 3 then. So in 5th place in our albums of the decade is PJ Harvey's Letting Gun Shake.
Okay.
In 4th place is Beyonce's Lemonade.
Okay.
And in 3rd place is Let Them Eat Chaos. 3rd place is Let Them Eat Chaos by Kate Tempest.
Okay, then we've got a 2-way tie for
We've got
first.
a 2-way tie for first.
Oh,
and
first is the
one
joint.
album really clawed its way back. One album has been in the lead all the way through doing this.
Okay.
The album that clawed its way back to a joint win is Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly.
Okay.
The album that was first all the way through and was a big surprise to me, and is still joint first, is Laura Marling's Once I Was an Eagle.
Wow. Okay.
So there you go for me.
Big reveal.
Album of the decade.
I feel so validated.
Yeah, it's been
so
all
do I,
the
'cause that's my pick as
way
well.
through. Bon Iver, mate.
I'm baffled.
Bon Iver finished one outside the top 5, and then we had Fionn Regan and
Okay, that'll
Kiasmos
do.
just outside there. The big shock was how many people have been into Kiasmos. He's been in a lot of top 5s. Which
That was my
shocked
number
to me.
6. That would have made.
Right.
I was debating what to
A
do.
lot of people had it 5th. One person had it 2nd. It's done really well. But yeah, Laura Marling has just smashed it. I mean,
Good
a
job.
lot of second places for Laura Marling. Me, Kirsten, and James all put Laura Marling 2nd. Kendrick
Right.
was just not appearing on any list until you three just put him up at the end.
Right. Okay.
So without those points,
Wow.
he just
I should
wasn't.
have put him lower, so my pick would be
Yeah,
number 1.
I mean, you should have put him lower because it's a much worse album than a lot of the albums that finished above. But yeah, Laura Marling and Kendrick.
Wow.
I mean, you couldn't get more different to each other, really, could you? Which is quite.
That's good.
No.
That's good. That shows our
That's awesome.
extremely good taste. We obviously the 14 of us
Yeah.
have, or 15 of us have. Yeah. So.
And yeah, tied bottom was Beck, Father John Misty, and Augustines, who all got 8 points.
Okay.
Interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, I just wanted to make sure we said thank you to all the writers who've
Yeah,
done
absolutely.
so much work on to put this
Yeah.
together, basically, and agonised
Yeah.
over it. I know there's a lot of people sort of saying, I don't know what to do, what shall I go with, so, and they wrote their pieces for it, and,
Yeah.
they've all managed to score stuff, so they've had a role in this conversation as well today, which is great.
Yeah, and if you want to check out that original article, just go to pickabees.com and search Album of the Decade. I think it's there's some really interesting and I love the fact that it was a mix of people choosing albums because of the importance of the album and people choosing it because of how much it meant to them. I
Yes.
think that was really
Yeah.
interesting. So yeah, fantastic. Okay, Albums of the Decade, joint Laura Marling and Kendrick Lamar.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
I
So
do like an explosion sound
Nice.
now.
yeah, can you put an explosion in there? Yeah.
That was it there. I'm not going to actually
Okay.
put on an edit.
Right. Brilliant. Well, next episode.
That was great.
Thanks, Sam, as well. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you.
Thank you for
It's been-
putting Laura
Yeah,
Marling
thanks,
Involved in
Sam.
all this as well with the blog. It's great.
Amazing.
So we just got next episode to talk about.
Yes, which will be, for the first time in a while, a normal episode with me, Matt, and Nick. So sorry, guys. We just have to put up with the 3 of us next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going
Stuck
to do a
with
normal
us.
episode. I am going to pick, as my 2 new recent releases, The Return by Semper the Great, and When I Say to You Black Lightning by Common Holly.
And I have picked Liturgy with HAQQ and Chelsea Wolfe with Birth of Violence.
And Matt will be in charge.
And then, I'm going to be hosting, and I've picked for the classic album, Chance the Rapper's Acid Rap, and then I'm going to be introducing you to a band I love, which is Metronomy.
Okay.
Never
Right.
ever heard a song by them, so
I
excited.
mean, neither.
It's going to be good.
Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks again, Sam.
That's it. After all
And
build
thanks,
up.
writers.
Thanks very much.
See you
We will
on
talk to you next
Cheers.
time.
Bye.
Bye. Shall we see if we recorded that then?
Yes.
God, if we haven't.
I'll take Matt. Matt's still there, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Hi, Matt.
Hold on a second.
Hi.